Namaskar. Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host 𝙒𝙖𝙩𝙤. Joining me today after a lapse of a few months is Professor M D Nalapat, and we are going to talk about his new book, Cold War 2.0: Illusion versus Reality. And let's welcome our guest of the evening, Professor Nalapat. Professor Nalapat, Namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel.
Thank you very much, Sri.
Sir, it's been a while since we had you on our channel, and I hope you're doing well, sir. All our viewers' prayers go to your well-being, and hopefully everything is going okay on your end, sir.
Sri, both you and I, we believe in a divine force, and we are all, in the control of that divine force. So that divine force has decreed that I'm speaking to you now.
So true, so true. Miles to go before we both sleep. So, sir, congratulations on this book. Excellent title, very, very compelling read. And I've actually fast read the book, so I have a few questions. The most important thing that comes to my mind is you are the best suited person, in my opinion, to write about this because the world order has been changing for the last 100 years. The First World War, after the end of that, Britain was already losing its sheen, and then you had the brief rise of Germany, and then United States took over. Then there was Russia, and now you have a new superpower, which is China. And coming in just day before BRICS is going to start, this is the best time to have this conversation. The first question that I have, Professor Nalapat, about this book, and viewers, you should really read this book because he has, in a very small amount of space, he has condensed a lot of realities of what is happening in geopolitics in and around the world. The first question I have for you, Professor Nalapat, is that you mentioned that under Deng Xiaoping, China enjoyed more autonomy and decision-making power at the local level than even today under the Modi administration. Care to elaborate on that?
No, I didn't say Modi administration. I said Xi Jinping administration.
Xi Jinping.
There's quite a big difference between Modi and Xi Jinping, Sri. But before that, I want to tell you about two books because they're the two bookends. First was my book, 75 Years of Indian Foreign Policy, which came out last August. In that book, I had argued that the two largest democracies, India and the United States, would willy-nilly need to work together. The way, Sri, is like an arranged marriage. Well, what brings about an arranged marriage? The family of, if I may call the family of interests, the family of circumstances brings together an arranged marriage. And, that's different from a love marriage in which you have a sudden passion, a sudden emotion. Now, for example, this intense love that the United States is now under the Biden administration is feeling for Ukraine resembles very much a very torrid, love relationship. Now, the unfortunate fact is usually last a lot longer than than these kind of torrid love marriages. So having said that, I want to point out, when I wrote that book and I made it clear that the two big democracies need to work together to basically ensure not war but peace, that that Asia should not go the way of Europe in the first half of the 20th century did. We should not go that way in the first half of the 21st century. I made that point, and as a deterrent, India and the United States needed to work together, not to begin a war, but to prevent a war. There was a certain amount of criticism. I mean, I'm not going to name a particular university in Delhi that is a very well-known university. I've got a lot of good friends there. It's a wonderful university. Some of the leading lights, who were in that university at one time, who are still, they thought this was too, quote unquote, pro-American. Look, this is nothing to do with love for America or love for India on the part of your country or mine. This has to do with mutuality of interests, commonality of interests. And the commonality of interests needs us to work together in the Indo-Pacific very, very clearly. Now, I have always stressed the question of interest. You'll remember, Sri, on this channel, I opposed S-400. You remember that very clearly.
Yes.
I was one of the possibly, I mean, I don't think there were too many people who opposed the S-400 deal.
Yeah.
I said, let's trade with Russia. Russia is a good friend of India. Let it remain so. Let's double or triple our trade with Russia. But for God's sake, don't buy defense equipment, because today Russia and China are linked at the hip in defense and security. And now what's happening? S-400 deliveries have stopped. You understand? So, what I was warning about came to pass. So I was very much in favor of a good relationship with Russia. I am very much in favor of that. I'm very much in favor of us buying a lot of Russian products, oil and gas, for example, and Prime Minister Modi is doing that. I'm very happy to say, in a very abundant fashion, but not defense equipment. Certainly not the S-400, a very critical system. When its partner linked at the hip in matters of defense is China. And when you've got partners linked to the hip, they share a lot of strategic information. So I look at things from the point of view of reality. It's not illusion, it's reality. And the point about reality is it's hard, cold fact. Illusion is based on emotion, it's based on subjective characteristics. So when I wrote that book, and I got this kind of blowback from some people, the book has done very well, by the way, overall, especially among young people. I was okay with it. This is the second bookend, Cold War 2.0, because I wanted these two books I had planned in my mind before I wrote them. And I wrote this book to point out the inevitability of, if I may say so, what we are witnessing now, the inevitability of a separation, a distance between China and the democracies, between tech, for example, into two tech worlds, the China-centered tech world and the democracy-centered tech world. I think we have discussed that in PGurus. It's there in my writings, it's there in my talks, it's all over the place. Well, you still have a lot of people who believe, no, we can talk to them, we can sort things out. In the United States, there are more than that. There are people in India who believe that, because we have actually seen our soldiers on the front line, and we have seen some of them getting martyred. And of course, we inflicted our own share of casualties on the Chinese side. But the point of the matter is very simple. It's inevitable. And you are seeing an inevitability about this. Biden, well, there's a lot of talk about the Biden family. I'm not going to go into that. I don't believe, I don't believe in retailing gossip. But the fact is that Joe Biden was not regarded as a hawk on China. He's very much a hawk on Russia. The poor man still believes we are in Cold War 1.0. Otherwise, he would not have romantically jumped into the Ukraine conflict using raw emotion rather than, if I may say so, reason. And unfortunately, a lot of Europe has jumped along with that in raw emotion. Russia today is a junior partner of China. The problem is not Russia, the problem is China. The theater is not Europe. Sorry, Europe, please don't get upset. Sorry, those in North America who are basically think that they are Europeans who have landed on the wrong side of the Atlantic Ocean. It is the Indo-Pacific. And from that point of view, I wanted to make it clear who is going to be the new Soviet Union. It is going to be the People's Republic of China. And in this book, I give the arguments why I believe that. And that is why I call it illusion versus reality. Now it's coming out 28th of August. The printing will be complete. It's going to be on the bookstands about a week or a couple of weeks after that. But it's, of course, available on Amazon, etc., if you pre-book. But the fact is, I did that, Sri, because I wanted to basically say very clearly that this is the situation. I remember the 1930s. You had a few people who pointed out you cannot have a peaceful resolution of the situation in Europe unless you deal with a leader and a governance system that is fundamentally feeding on aggressive instincts and on expansionism. You cannot have it in Europe. They were regarded as fringe. Some of them were called the lunatic fringe, if I may say so. I mean, Winston Churchill was very wrong about India, very wrong about many things, but he was absolutely right about his analysis situation in Europe in the 1930s. And 99% of his fellow conservatives were wrong. I don't want a similar mistake today in the 21st century. I want it to be clear, where our problem is. It's in the Indo-Pacific. It's in China. It's not in Russia. It's not in Ukraine. Quite frankly, Taiwan, India. I mean, let's not talk about India because it's obvious why India is important. Let's talk about Taiwan. Okay, let's talk about Taiwan and India. You have flooded Ukraine, which is, in my view, a second or third or fourth degree, if I may say so, security issue for the United States. And you are selling at top dollar arms to Taiwan, that too in a very restricted way, arms to India, that too not very plentifully because we are not a rich country. We can't afford to buy more than a certain point. For example, 𝙤𝙬𝙤𝙬. I was asked by friends in government when I went against the S-400, what's the alternative? And I said, what about 𝙤𝙬𝙤𝙬? They said, do you know what they want to charge for 𝙤𝙬𝙤𝙬? And they quoted a price, an absurd price. And I was told Donald Trump wanted to make top dollar out of India, out of Japan, out of South Korea, about all the allies of the United States. He wanted to make top dollar. I mean, this is ridiculous. If you have, for example, a 𝙤𝙬𝙤𝙬 system in the Andaman Islands, the United States should give it free of cost because it will be vital to the security of the Indo-Pacific instead of charging India top dollar for and not even offering. I don't believe the Biden administration has made an offer, but S-400 was during the Trump deal. There was no real firm offer. There was some vague talk and very huge price tag. So there was no alternative. Why? Because people didn't realize the centrality of India. Now today, for example, you have Taiwan. Taiwan is the first line of defense of India and the United States and Europe. Ukraine is not anywhere in the first, second, or third line of defense, to be frank with you. For a long time, Ukraine was under the USSR. I didn't see the United States disintegrate. I didn't see those countries in Europe. I mean, I can understand Poland and Latvia and Lithuania who were under the Soviet, control, why they are angry. But France or Germany, I didn't see them dissolve because Ukraine was not in their control. I didn't see them dissolve up to 2014 when neutrality was guaranteed by the Ukrainian constitution. I didn't see any of them dissolve. But suddenly, if you argue that if Ukraine goes into the Russian orbit, then what's going to happen? Europe will disintegrate. United States will find itself collapse. Ladies and gentlemen, Europe will disintegrate if we lose the battle in the Indo-Pacific, and that battle is already on. It's on because today you have a hybrid war. It's there in our internet systems. Now we had years ago I wrote. Thank God that through writing and other things you can confirm what you said. In the past, when I used to say these things and there was no written record, people would say, no, I can't remember you saying it. I wrote very clearly that the Chinese Communist state, and please remember, I'm not talking of China or the Chinese people. I'm talking of the CCP, specifically the CCP leadership. And these people are using the internet to widen social divisions in India and to widen social divisions in the United States. When the moderate middle shrinks and the extremes on both sides grow, a country becomes unstable. And we are seeing the way social media is acting as a kind of a prime mover of that kind of expansion of the fringe at the expense of the moderate majority. This is part of hybrid warfare. Hybrid warfare is illness, is disease. And I'm sorry to say, I mean, where the United States is concerned, the United States funded a lot of the research that frankly led to the development of the COVID, of the SARS-19 virus. And till now, there's been no accountability. Dr. Fauci, Dr. Daszak, all these people are walking around absolutely freely and having a great time.
Thank you so much, Professor Nalapat. I have a question for you. Today, if you look at the three largest passive asset management companies in the United States, Vanguard, BlackRock, and State Street, combined assets under management is $22 trillion. The US GDP is $26 trillion. Many now say that it is these big companies now that are actually running the Biden administration, and that Biden has been more or less paying his, going through his checklist of what promises he made in order to become president, and he's just, yielding to all those things. Take a look at the unmitigated, unbridled illegal immigration that's taking place into the United States. BlackRock has benefited. They have interest in energy. They have interest in weapons. They have interest in. I mean, this is a huge conglomerate now. So in such a scenario today, what we are seeing is there is going to be a new BRICS summit. And just before the BRICS summit, what has happened is China's biggest real estate company has declared bankruptcy in a court in New York. So how much do you think the American economy and America is concerned about BRICS being a counterbalance or a counterweight or a counter to dollar? Because euro also was supposed to be that, and it has not been able to do that. Do you see something where US is still trying to kind of peg pull the BRICS back? What are your thoughts on that?
Can you tell me which is the worst enemy of the US dollar?
What is the worst enemy of the US dollar?
Yes.
I don't know. I haven't thought
the
that
United States government.
Yes.
You have gone and weaponized sanctions. For example, this whole question
against Russia, for sure. Yeah.
Against many countries, but Russia, a very significant country. You cut Europe off from Russian natural resources. The Europeans are committing suicide. The Germans are committing suicide. And that is now, they're slowly choking. And you're seeing that happen. The fact of the matter is, Sri, that Russia has now become a very, its levers of freedom vis-a-vis China have almost vanished. And, and this is a problem for us in India. That's one of the reasons why, we are not getting the deliveries of S-400 that were promised to us. And that is the reason why a lot of people in India are now realizing relying on Russian arms is a problem. Something that you and I discussed 3-4 years ago, and both of us were very badly criticized by a lot of well-meaning friends in India because of that. The fact is, sanctions are absurd because the dollar is a universal currency. And then when you have a universal currency, you can print as much as you like because there'll always be a demand for dollars. But when you start using that power to sanction countries, for example, ethnicities, in this Ukraine conflict, you're sanctioning people of Russian ethnicity who are not even Russian citizens. You are sequestering their property. Now, I would like to ask, even at this stage, 2011 was when it happened. What has happened to all the assets of Muammar Gaddafi? What has happened in 2003? What happened to all the assets of Saddam Hussein? Saddam Hussein had a huge number of assets. What has happened to all of them? Where have they gone? Can anyone tell me? I have no idea. No one has, it's not only, I mean, I haven't seen any public thing as to what happened to all the billions of dollars that Saddam had, to all the billions that Gaddafi had, that Libya had. So where has it gone away? And today, you're talking about confiscating the property of so-called Russian oligarchs. Many of them are ethnically Russian, but their passports are different. Now, when you start doing that thing, tomorrow you're creating a situation in which people are simply terrified of holding the dollar, of holding the euro, of holding the Swiss franc, of holding the British pound. Why? Because tomorrow somebody may wake and say, okay, you are the enemy now. That's why Arab countries are now gravitating towards China and Russia, because they feel today it is the Russian ethnicity, tomorrow it may be the Arab ethnicity. Day after tomorrow, it may, it may be those of Chinese ethnicity. I'm not talking of hardened Chinese communist leaders. By the way, they're all unsanctioned. They're all completely free to operate. Nobody does anything against them. God knows why. When you're acting so much against people who are much less of a security threat, why you're not acting against them, I don't know. But you're talking about ethnic Chinese who are maybe friendly with individuals in China, mostly for business reasons. You're talking about these financial companies. Every one of them, at no time out of 365 days in a year, will you find a single day in which they have not, one of the other of their top people is not visiting China or cultivating the Chinese. And today the Chinese under Xi Jinping are clear. You got to help us the way we want. And the way we want is the way the PLA wants. And so willy-nilly, if you want to make money in China, you pay. And what do you pay? You pay in the currency of the security of your country. And that's what's happening. So I'd only like to say, Sri, you and I have talked about this at length. You and I have talked about Ukraine. I regarded it as a diversion. I regarded it as secondary theater, then and now. And the only point I've got about the Biden administration, and unfortunately a lot of Republicans as well, whether it's Mitch McConnell and some others. Now you have that Vivek, that chap who's come in, Krishnaswamy. Vivek Ramaswamy. I must say the guy is brilliant. He said what we need to do is detach Russia from China, period. He said that, I think it was to one of these television channels, possibly even CNN. The voice of the White House, if I may say so. He is absolutely right. The Americans played a very smart game in detaching China, and basically China had no reason, they're already detached. It was detached from the late 1950s, recognizing that and leveraging that against the Soviet Union. What this guy Ramaswamy is saying is do that against China, because China is the threat. This guy certainly has the brains to be in the White House. In case some other person comes as the presidential candidate, I hope he's going to make him the vice president, because this guy is absolutely right. And he said it out loud. And he said it out loud because we are now into almost the 600th day of the Ukraine war. And everybody has now got Ukraine fatigue. And everybody has now understood Ukraine is being battered and completely smashed. And if Ukraine is so important to Europe, and when Ukraine is getting smashed, well, I don't see a similar effect on Europe. I am seeing a very big effect of the lack of Russian resources in Germany and in other parts of Europe. But I'm not seeing any effect of Ukraine, which makes my basic point. Ukraine is not even a first, second, or third degree security problem. Taiwan is a first degree problem. And you make Taiwan pay through your nose for a little dribble of weapons, where you should give it to them free. And you're giving a country which is not even a fourth grade security issue with you, all the weapons that it can swallow and more. Weapons, 40% of it land up in the black market. Incidentally, I pointed that out 2 months into the war when I was given a briefing by some friends who were based there and who have since not there anymore. So I can mention where I got that from. So, Sri, let's be adult about this. The problem is the United States also hasn't faced up to this reality. And the United States' actions are killing the dollar as an international currency. This is giving an opportunity for China and Russia. And they want to introduce a different currency. Initially the Chinese wanted it to be renminbi. The Russians, of course, had to go along because now they're being forced to go along with whatever the Chinese want, thanks to this situation regarding their sanctions and this war, etc. But the whole point is to dethrone the dollar as the global currency, and that is what the Chinese are attempting to do. And you are helping them with this policy of sanctions because please understand, unless a dollar is safe to hold, who's going to hold it? And with the risk that any country can be sanctioned, some president may come, some national security advisor, some bunch of senators may get an allergy to some country and say, let's sanction them. Let's sanction all the guys there. And hey presto, your dollar holdings are so much, ash, so much waste paper. So this is the problem, Sri. Let's be honest. The fact is, let's face up to reality. Let's have policies based on reality. If you want the advantage of the dollar as a global currency, you have to understand that as a global currency, you as the manager have got to remain neutral. The Swiss basically altered their neutrality in the Ukraine conflict, and now you saw, Credit Suisse almost collapse. In my suspicion is a lot of Russian money left, a lot of Chinese money left because Chinese said we may be next. And Credit Suisse is in trouble. Swiss are in trouble because they're no longer neutral. They are now part of NATO, if I may say so. They may be formally part of NATO. It's no longer neutral. You have to have a neutral dollar. And if you don't like that, well, all right, then what you're doing is opening the door for efforts by your enemies to set up a new currency that will accelerate the fall of the dollar. So again, Sri, maybe now there'll be a lot of negativity about what I'm saying. Like there was negativity in the past about some of the things that I've said on your channel. I'm not bothered. 2 or 3 years later, I'll be proved right. I just hope by that time, the dollar is not worthless. Why? 99% because of the actions of the United States government, thinking that the dollar is indispensable. There's a company which there, and I was told in that company there's a policy. The minute a man becomes indispensable, kick him out. Kick him out. We don't want anyone who's indispensable. Don't believe the dollar is indispensable. It's not. Even India is now forced to look elsewhere, mainly because we have this Russian oil. We can't pay in dollars. You're harming your own currency by saying, you're blocking payment to certain countries in dollars. You have to be neutral. So, Sri, in this Cold War, we have got to be cold-blooded about our own policies. And Vivek Ramaswamy, let me tell you one thing, that guy gets it. Not too many people get it. Certainly, I'm not saying Joe Biden gets it. As I told you, Joe Biden is basically like a moonstruck schoolboy where Ukraine is concerned, with all the rationality of a moonstruck schoolboy. But where China is concerned, you've got to be an adult. You've got to be rational. You've got to use your brains, not your glands. And too many people in too many countries are still using their glands and not their brains. Then this is why this second bookend I had to bring out, and which Penguin is bringing out. Penguin is not an Indian publisher. My earlier book was Rupa, one of the finest publishers in the world, an Indian publisher. This is Penguin, acknowledged as one of the top publishers in the world. And why? Because even in the West, people are beginning to understand that some of the narratives that have been there are not correct. And you look at you and I have arguments about Ukraine. I mean, Asia, Africa, Latin America, what are they thinking? They're thinking that the United States is only concerned about, I hate to use these terms, a white country. a European country. They're not concerned about the rest of us. They're putting all their oxygen because there, when you got people dying in all over the world, you got people suffering in Venezuela, you got people suffering inside South, in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America, but nobody's talking about them. It's all about a few people, relative in terms of number, much fewer number of people in Europe. And this is really harming the soft power of the United States in where it counts, in the Indo-Pacific. The Japanese are very polite people. The Koreans, under the current dispensation, are very smart about their security. They are coming to you, and but please understand, the back of their minds, they must also be thinking, where are these guys going? Don't they realize what the challenge is? We do. They still don't. So I'm only saying, Sri, do we need a third world war before people come around? That was the thinking why I wrote this book. Do we need a third world war? This book is not to promote a war. This book is not about a war. The book is to prevent a war by creating a deterrent force and deterrent policies, and by ignoring illusion and embracing reality.
Thank you, Professor Nalapat. There's a question that I wanted to address. This is not related to our topic today, but people keep asking me, when is Vivek going to come on PGurus channel? PGurus is, if he comes on PGurus, it is like preaching to the choir. Every Indian American is proud that another Indian American is contesting for presidency. What he really needs to concentrate is to try and win over Main Street America, mainland America. That's where his efforts need to be. Once that is prevailed, once he becomes like the top two finisher in the Republican Party, then it would be a good time for him to come on PGurus channel and explain his vision to all of us. So just wait for some more time, guys. We will have him. We do have connects, but right now his bigger challenge is to try and convince America that he can be their commander-in-chief. Many Americans are confusing him, saying that, oh, you are a Hindu, therefore, I have some concerns being a Christian. So he has clarified that very eloquently, saying, I am running for your commander-in-chief, not pastor-in-chief. So we'll wait and see.
No, Sri, if I may say so, Sanatan Dharma embraces every single philosophy. It's a universal faith. It's like a universal blood donor. You can, a universal blood donor, that individual's blood, her or his blood, can put anywhere. Sanatan Dharma can fit any faith, I can tell you. So Vivek Ramaswamy is a Sanatani. I am a Sanatani. For me, every faith, the Sanatani can embrace every single faith, can learn to live and love every single faith, because the Sanatani does not regard the world in vertical terms, high, low, but horizontal terms, different but equal. So that's one point. Second, I'm told the chap has already now become among the top two. And that's why I'm saying that, yes, I think he should be whoever is the presidential candidate. It could be Donald Trump, frankly, for all you know. As things stand, it could be Donald Trump on the Republican side. And if Joe Biden messes up even more, the Republicans may just win. Then I think a good advice to Donald Trump, and I'm talking as somebody who in 2016 said nice things about Trump, that he'll be the next president. I'd like to say, I think I would certainly hope that Donald Trump shows that he's not a bigot and he chooses Vivek Ramaswamy. Because let me tell you one thing. I have met people in Europe, United States, everything. And what you call the white people, I would say 90% of them are, in my view, free of racial prejudice. I don't know what the situation was, 100 years ago.
Meritocracy
today
runs
I
in
can
their
tell
blood.
you,
Yes.
90% are free of prejudice. And when Vivek Ramaswamy talks sense, even CNN has to admit that and not try and put him down, quite frankly. So I think the guy is going somewhere.
Somebody has lost their job at CNN trying to do just that.
Get this guy as your vice president, I can tell you, because he gets it. He gets the reality of Cold War 2.0. He has no illusions. It's only reality. And again, I'd like to say, using a religious argument against him is absurd because he is a universal faith. Sanatan Dharma is a universal faith, like a universal blood donor. So, I mean, Vivek Ramaswamy embraces every single faith and then some. So, I don't think that's a very good argument that can be used against him.
Professor Nalapat, the only challenge here is that Hinduism, Sanatana Dharma, the way it is portrayed in the textbooks in America, and this is a fault of people like me who have put down roots in America but did not spend that little extra time to make sure that their children and America itself learns the correct history about Hinduism. See, the thing is that Hinduism typically is represented as two pictures. One is that of Nataraja dancing on a baby instead of the Rakshasa Muyalakan, who is actually a demon. And what he's trying to do is to suppress the demon from raising his ugly head, but it is pictured as if God is dancing on a baby. And the other picture they use is that of Kali drinking blood. So the problem is that it is a very literal interpretation. And in fact, I will tell you, there are three grades by which this is described by many so-called self-styled Hindu experts in United States of America. Hindu, Hindutva, Sanatana Dharma. In their words, in their world, Sanatana Dharma is far worse than Hindutva, which itself, people try to, say that Hindu is good, Hindutva is bad, and when not understanding that the letter Twa in Sanskrit means Hinduness or being a Hindu. So anybody who's a Hindu is also, practicing Hindutva. But this is the kind of understanding they have about Sanatana Dharma. A long way to go about dispelling that.
Sri, I'm sorry. I am not a pessimist on these matters. For the first point is there. Secondly, I am a Sanatani, and I can assure you that, wrong impressions will be there. And in our own case, do you know that up to 2021, 38% of the significant monuments of the Archaeological Survey of India were the graves of the British soldiers who basically died ensuring that the British Empire prevailed over the Indians. 38% of the ASI's significant monuments. I'm talking of not 1947 or 1951 or 61 or 71 or 81. 2021, until Prime Minister Modi found that out and corrected it. So, I am very certain, and as you about descriptions that they have and all, they're welcome to whatever they want. Sanatan Dharma, in my view, there's a destiny about Sanatan Dharma, and there are people who, you had this thing, about that great nuclear physicist. You had that movie, a very, very powerful movie. A very, very powerful movie. The fact is, if you read a Sanatani book, the Bhagavad Gita, for example, the Mahabharata, it should be taught in every classroom in the world. It's a civics lesson. When you talk of the Ramayana, it's the quintessential love story of humanity. It's so beautiful. It's such a beautiful story. So my point is, let's not get hung up on, on some people saying this and some people saying that. I've always found the best way to deal with someone who's talking nonsense is to just ignore that person and talk sense. And finally, the sense will reach even him. Now, India, for example, the New York Times, the Washington Post, or CNN, no matter what they say about India, India is definitely today a country which is treated with a high degree of regard by Americans and by the Biden administration. Look at the way Joe Biden, Jill Biden, and Narendra Modi, the way they were together with each other. All three of them. And why? Because it is a destiny. And my point is, this is our destiny of today. This is our destiny of today. And the destiny of my earlier book in August was basically if I may say so, picturizing Biden, Modi, and Jill Biden, of course, was, very important to have the First Lady. Uh, and that has come true. That 75 years of Indian foreign policy by Rupa came true in Technicolor in television screens. This will also come true, which is an alliance of democracies and some countries such as Vietnam, etc., to confront an aggressive, expansionist power run by a leader who believes in the use of force as his default option. When you have that kind of a combination of a people that have really been pumped up to believe that they are superior, that is the people in the Communist Party, and they are superior, they run the rest of China. There's a big difference between a Communist Party member and a non-communist member in China. But, even though the communists are only about 90 million out of 1.38 billion. So I'm quite frankly optimistic that it is not going to take long. But my worry is we may stumble into a third world war unless we understand the lessons of the past. This book, the first book, was written as basically the direction that we should go. This book is warning of the danger ahead if we do not take the right direction.
Thank you so much, Professor Nalapat. We have a few questions for you from our viewers. Let's take a few questions, please. Rahul Rathod wants to know why West and now China are obsessed with foreign policy instead of looking inwards. In India, nowadays, foreign policy is popular, but it's not a major part of politics. Do common people care about foreign policy in the West?
Well, look, common people may not care about foreign policy. Uncommon people may not care about foreign policy. Everybody is common, everybody is uncommon in different ways. But the fact is, foreign policy touches all our lives. Foreign policy has got to be an instrument of welfare of the people and the country. Foreign policy cannot be divorced from the overall good of the country. And you have to use foreign policy as one more instrument for betterment of the lives of the people. Now, for example, you're seeing this opportunity with decoupling of tech from China. It is going to be inevitable for electric cars to be made in India. It's going to be inevitable for Apple iPhones to be made in India. Why is it inevitable? Because technology being such, if you produce an electric car in China, you can sell it in China, Russia, Iran, Pakistan, but very few other countries. In the next few years, that's going to happen. If you produce an Apple iPhone in China, well, the Chinese will not want to buy it, of course. They'll clone it and have their own thing, but you won't be able to sell it anywhere. So you'll have to willy-nilly come, and you'll have to come, India would be a very good bet. So I'd like to say that, there is an inevitability, frankly, about the transition that India is going through and the Cold War 2.0. We have discussed this many times, Sri. The Chinese took full advantage of Cold War 1.2. Deng Xiaoping grew because of that. Xi Jinping, and I again like to say it was Xi Jinping I was referring to. You can, that is very clear. It's in the book, it's everywhere. It's nothing to do with our people at all. But, the reality of the situation is we have got the opportunity of a generation and several generations in Cold War 2.0. We have to leverage Cold War 2.0 the way the Chinese leverage Cold War 1.0 and come out of it as the tertius gardens, the golden middle player, the third actor. So when you have A and B, the third actor becomes golden, and that is a golden opportunity. So we have to seize this opportunity. And in my book, I've talked about ambivalence, I've talked about ambiguity, I've talked about shedding it. I have shed ambiguity in my writings, in my talk, in these books. And the point is, we need to shed that as well in the United States and in India. And we need to understand we are in a marriage arranged by the circumstances of the conditions that we have, the interests and realities that we face, and we better get used to it. So my first book and the second book, in a sense, there's a book in between, which is published by Manipal Universal Press. Again, an excellent book called Geo-Politics of the 21st Century, which came about 5 months ago. But I'd like to say these are the two bookends. And that is why I'm glad you're having this discussion with me, Sri. I'm glad you're having the discussion in California, because a lot of people in California are now waking up to the fact that China was a great place, but it may still be okay. But in 2 or 3 years' time, well, unless you are allowed to sell in China, which you will not be, because the situation will develop to that level, you are not going to be able to sell anywhere outside China, Russia, and Russia. If Vivek Ramaswamy has some say in the matter, Russia will go with the West. I mean, it is hanging on to its relationship with India. It's one of the few independent levers it has got. But frankly, it is so much bound into China that it is now proving of less and less value to us. But the reality is, I can tell you that, if Ramaswamy gets it, and if people are willing to listen to him and make him, come second in some of these polls, that means Americans are listening. Indians are listening. Some, I would have been abused, frankly. Now, if you had the CNN thing of Narendra Modi and Biden and Jill Biden, well, there'd have been a flurry of negativity, and within and without or whatever. Nothing, because people are beginning to understand it's inevitable. Of course, you have some leaders who basically, behave in a different way, but forget about that. That's also one more reason why, Sri, in my view, what is necessary, frankly, I'll tell you, is another 5 years more of a continuation of this digitalization, etc. Because you're a technical man, you will understand that with digitalization comes transparency. With digitalization comes access. And the more digitalization that you have, and the greater the reach of people to the online world, the greater their access to, to laptops and to smartphones, well, the greater the chance that transparency is going to become bigger and bigger, so that nobody can stop it. So I'm optimistic about India, I can tell you. And as far as foreign policy is concerned, sir, there's no difference. Foreign, domestic, foreign, it's now a seamless, singular entity working, hopefully, for the common good.
Thank you, sir. And Jairam Gopalan Iyer wants to know, is not inaction by Indian government and lack of strict laws encouraging third-rate countries, arrogant China, terrorist Pakistan and their sponsored people, fake institutions, narratives, etc., etc.?
Well, I'd like to say that, there are a lot of narratives that are unsaid on the Indian side. And one of the reasons could be that a lot of the activities of this government, there are dozens of them. And when you put about 3 dozen, 4 dozen together in a list, nobody looks at anything in that list. It's like you see an article which is more than, let's say, 1,500 words. You don't read it, frankly. You may not even skim through it. So this is the problem that we are facing here, actually. So I would like to see much more deregulation. And again, I'd like to point out, a lot of stuff has been decriminalized over the last few months under the direction of the Prime Minister. And this decriminalization is essential. Much of this was criminalized not really to punish the wrongdoer. The problem is, Sri, to so-called catch that one crook, you are preventing 99 Indian manufacturers from competing with their global competitors in the Indian market. You are handicapping them. So decriminalization is important, very, very important. And now that is happening. A lot of deregulation has taken place. A lot more has to take place. And thank God, for example, we are now, moving into an era where it's not going to be 1860 police law or some 1871, penal code that is operative, but something that is relevant in the 21st century. And believe me, with public discourse coming online, with discussions coming online, with 700 and now it's very soon 900 million Indians having access to the internet via, I hope, very cheap smartphones, which definitely are going to come, cheap laptops, which are going to come. Believe me, Sri, transparency is inevitable. And with transparency comes, if I may say so, integrity and probity. When, it's like I've been pushing so hard for courts to be completely, live streamed. I've been pushing so hard for as many processes as possible to be live streamed. I've been pushing hard for the movement of files to be recorded so that people know when a file is moving up and when it is moving down. And eventually that is going to happen. Why? Public demand. And in my personal view, and I can be faulted for this, I have a right to an opinion. In my personal view, Narendra Modi gets it. He's got a good mind, a modern mind. And in my view, in the next 4 or 5 years, all this is going to happen.
Thank you, sir. We have a lot of questions, and I would request you to keep your answers short, Nalapatji, so that we can cover as many as possible.
Okay.
Me at IPE, Ramaswamy has said that there is no worry about climate change and alternative fuels. Should economies be bothered about investing in green energies?
Look, I'd like to say that there will be no worry about climate change provided we can harness the sunlight and provided we can desalinate water, provided we have these technologies. But I can tell you that, climate change is a reality, and it is something that probably Mr. Ramaswamy, like a politician, is playing to a particular base. He knows he's possibly temperamentally unsuited to certain elements of the Republican base. Probably he's playing to some other bases. But anybody in the world today who denies the actuality of climate change is basically living in a dungeon. I think there is there's some guy, like Julian Assange, for example, who came and revealed a lot of stuff. He's in some dungeon there. If you're Julian Assange, I would say, and that's your real opinion, I would say because you're out of the real world. Not that Assange would be a climate denier, of course not. But the fact is, you go out and you see climate change. You travel, you see climate change. Every day, in every way, you're seeing climate change. So anyone who's saying that there is no climate change, well, I'm afraid that individual is playing to the gallery. And Vivek Ramaswamy wants to get elected. He's a politician. Politicians want to get elected. They want to come into your office. So I guess he's making that particular compromise.
Next question, please. Thank you so much, Anupam Dev, for becoming a YouTube member. Yashpal, thank you for becoming a member. 𝗤𝙧𝙤𝘀𝘀, thank you for your generous donation. Murli Rao, thank you so much. Pranam to Professor Nalapat and Sriji. Your views on the current situation of Chinese economy. How serious is the problem?
In my view, Sri, it is extremely serious. At last, my friend Gordon Chang's prophecy of the coming collapse of China is finally coming true. The reality is that this is going to be the problem for China. Cold War 2.0. The more and more people understand this new Cold War, the more and more people understand the reality, the worse it is going to be for industries located in China. The worse it is going to be for Chinese ability to steal technology. So I can tell you that, and you're seeing what's happening now. Real estate, people used to buy real estate to keep their money. Why? Because you could always sell your house and you could sell it at a higher price. Today, you can't sell your house. You can't sell your flat and you can't sell at a high price. You've got to sell at a knockdown price. So there's a collapse of real estate demand. And that's nearly 40% of your GDP comes from that. So I'd like to say the Chinese economy is in big, big, big trouble, in my opinion. But, let me say, I distinguish between the Chinese people and the Chinese Communist Party members. I distinguish between the junior members and the middle members, the senior members, and I distinguish the top leadership, which is in a completely different, universe altogether from any of these other sub-universes. So having said that, I'd like to point out that the top leadership of the Chinese Communist Party is doing a tremendous wrecking job of the Chinese economy by its greediness to grab territory, by expansion to grab interests, And basically, there's a, when I mean, it's like the case of, the monkey who put his hand in the bottle and who took too many peanuts, couldn't take the hand out of the bottle. This is what's happening. This leadership is grabbing too much, and in the process, it's going to end up with very little.
Thank you so much, sir. And Bakul Dada, thank you so much. What is our biggest internal risk?
In India?
Yeah. Yes.
Well, the biggest internal risk, in my opinion, will come from this, culture, this colonial era culture of control that is so ingrained in our governance system, where we value process over product. Product is what feeds you. Product is what clothes and houses and makes you healthy. Process is supposed to help create a product. But in India, process has replaced the product. If you produce a product and there is, the process is not A, B, C, D up to some guidebook produced 100 years ago, you get into trouble 20 years later. That's absurd. So I do believe that there has to be protection to those who generate product in the governance system, civil servants, etc. And those who are successful in raising in meeting their objectives, in raising their living standards, well, maybe the processes that they were prescribed were wrong, and the processes that they followed need to be followed. So the danger that we have in India, frankly, over-regulation, over-criminalization, and over-emphasis on process at the expense of product, and that is handicapping local industry. Taxation. Another thing is taxation. GST, way too high rates. From the very beginning, I've been saying a brilliant idea, you've got to have much lower rates. So if you cut rates, you'll get more people in the tax system. You don't have enough people in the tax system because the rates are too high, the regulations are too onerous, and they don't want to take the chance. They don't want to take the risk. Cut rates, cut this kind of onerous activity, cut this kind of criminalization, and you'll get 10 times more people paying their taxes. 10 times, I know, practical example, Sri. I walked around, just a minute I'll take, and walking around and looked into various small, shopkeepers who, they were small, but they were all handling about 30, 40, 50 lakhs. Only a few of them were declaring GST. The others were going through all kinds of fudging because they said it's too complicated, it's too expensive. If you had a lower rate of GST, you'd have collected way more tax. Because all these guys who were keeping out, they didn't want to keep out, but they said it's just too much for us, we can't compete. And the guys who were paying the GST, many of them went out of business. So you have to have realistic rates. And if you have realistic rates, you'll have greater collection. And I can tell you, there's one individual I addressed this to once in a meeting in which you had a fairly large number of people present, that don't you think lower taxes will lead to greater total revenue? And he said, yes, you're right. And that gentleman, that person was Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And he's absolutely right. So I'd like to see lower rates in this budget. To some extent, Nirmala has done something but not enough. I'd like to see lower rates on GST. I'd like to see much easier compliance. I'd like much further deregulation, much further decriminalization, because that is the one way we can unlock our talent.
Thank you so much. And this is the last question. Avinash Mansabdar, how is India playing its cards with US, Russia, China, be it BRICS, SCO, Quad, etc.? Are we smart to dip the curveballs our way?
Look, when you're a good player, you don't worry about curveballs. Every ball that is thrown by Mr. Xi Jinping will be a curveball. And the Russians will have to throw the occasional curveball at us to prove that they are loyal to the Chinese and they are loyal for their own survival. I'm not worried about any of these curveballs. The point is, friends like you in the United States, in India, those of us who think realistically, I can tell you, when a curveball comes, identify it and let's get away from it. We are smart enough to get away from it. So I'm not really worried about these things. So far as BRICS is concerned, thank God we are part of BRICS, because we can be
We seem to have momentarily lost him, and let me do my pitch for wrapping up. Please do like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to click on the bell button for notifications. We will have him back as soon as his comes up. I'm not so sure. It could be a phone call that could have disturbed. We had some difficulties during the connection time even before we started. So I apologize for that. Sometimes these things happen. And thanks once again for joining. And I thought I just heard him.
So I'm frankly quite that these curveballs will work out, and in the sense of being sent back. And it's good that India is in these groupings, because India represents the global south. And more importantly, India doesn't want SCO or BRICS to become a forum for slugging it out of one side, the Sino-Russian alliance, the Sino-Wahhabi alliance, against the other side, which is India, US, Japan, etc. So I think this is a good situation to be in, that we are in it. I'd rather we are in and we give our point of view bluntly, which we are doing now, rather than be out and be helpless, as in UNSC or what happened in ASEAN and in so many other fora.
Thank you so much, Professor Nalapat. And as always, a pleasure to listen to you, sir. And we'll be back again with Professor Nalapat at his convenience. And once again, thank you and namaskar.
Jai Hind.
Jai Hind.